Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm delighted to be in New Zealand, even though you're seeing me on video, to give this talk at the request of the National Assembly as part of this year's summer schools. I have been asked to talk on the topic of widening the circle of participation, which is really what the 9-year plan is all about. So let's start by looking at the vision of Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah, the divine messenger who founded the Baha'i faith in the middle of the 19th century, stated that the purpose for which humankind was created is to work for the betterment of the world and live together in concord and harmony. He said, "So powerful is the light of unity that it can illuminate the whole earth. Exert yourselves that ye may attain this transcendent and most sublime station, the station that can ensure the protection and security of all mankind." In this often quoted statement, we can see that Baha'u'llah's vision was of the circle of participation widening to embrace all of humanity. The exertion, the work that he calls upon us to undertake, is undertaken by Bahá'ís and other well-wishers of humanity. And it is based on the teachings of Baha'u'llah, teachings that address such essential themes as the oneness of God and religion, the oneness of humanity and freedom from prejudice, the inherent nobility of human beings, the progressive revelation of religious truth, the development of spiritual qualities, integration of worship and service, the fundamental equality of the sexes, the harmony between religion and science, the centrality of justice to all human endeavours, the importance of education, and the dynamics of the relationships that are to bind together individuals, communities, and institutions, sometimes called the three protagonists, as humanity advances towards its collective maturity. This is not just a matter of believing in some beautiful teachings, nor is it a matter of individual salvation. Baha'u'llah called on us to be anxiously concerned with the needs of the age ye live in, and center your deliberations on its exigencies and requirements. Every one of us is a member of the human family and can make an active contribution to the life of society. We are called upon to take initiative, seize opportunities, form friendships, and build relationships, joining with others in common service. In other words, to actively widen the circle of participation in the work of bettering the world. All of us need a strong sense of purpose that impels us both to pursue our own spiritual and intellectual growth, and at the same time to contribute to the transformation of society. The vision of Baha'u'llah provides us with this purpose and helps us to see that these are fundamentally inseparable dimensions of a single process. For the standards and behaviours of individuals shape their environment and in turn are moulded by social structures and processes. This is often referred to as the twofold moral purpose. It gains momentum as more and more people strive to align their lives with this vision. So learning to put Baha'u'llah's teachings into practice is a matter of individual and collective effort, involving increasing numbers of people, many of whom formally identify as Bahá'ís, as well as people from diverse backgrounds who work alongside them. The teachings of Baha'u'llah inspire and guide millions of people across the planet as they work for the spiritual and material advancement of society in thousands upon thousands of settings. Their efforts are founded on an appreciation of each person's capacity to become a protagonist, an actor in a profound spiritual drama. The communities to which they belong strive to learn in action, to be free from any sense of superiority or claim to exclusive understanding of truth. They strive to cultivate hope for the future of humanity, to foster purposeful effort, and to celebrate the endeavours of all those in the world who work to promote unity and alleviate human suffering. For over 100 years, and particularly for the last 25 years or so, the worldwide Baha'i community has been joining with those around us, learning how to raise such vibrant communities in every setting, contributing to material and spiritual progress. In providing a seminal message to guide the work of this 9-year plan, the latest stage in the systematic pursuit of the efforts to put Baha'u'llah's teachings into practice, the Universal House of Justice, the international governing body of the worldwide Baha'i community, observed, building a society that consciously pursues this collective purpose is the work not only this generation, but of many generations to come, and Baha'u'llah's followers welcome all who labour alongside them in this undertaking. This is not the exclusive work of Baha'is. In sharing some thoughts with you today on this topic of widening the circle of participation, the National Assembly asked me to take a broad historical perspective on this work of society building. But I'd also want to look at what this might mean at the level of a group of individuals, often in a family setting, who want to play their part today in responding to the needs of humanity at this crucial time. But let's look at the historical context. In the message of 30th of December 2021 to set out the provisions of the 9-year plan, the Universal House of Justice made clear that this is an important time in the history of the Baha'i faith and of humanity. They said, the plan that will shortly commence, the first major undertaking in a sacred 25-year venture, generational in its scope and significance, will make demands of the individual believer, the community, and the institutions reminiscent of the demand that the Guardian, the head of the Baha'i faith from 1921 to 1957, made of the Baha'i world at the outset of the 10-year crusade. The 10-year crusade was another special period of systematic action to bring Baha'u'llah's teachings into reality. The House of Justice continued, if by the grace of Almighty God, the Friends should succeed in reaching the heights of heroism to which they are now summoned, history will assuredly pay tribute to their actions in terms no less glowing than those with which it honours the glorious deeds that decorate the annals of the first century of the formative age. And we'll have a look at what the formative age is in a minute. We put great reliance on you and on the national spiritual assemblies, the national governing bodies in the Baha'i community, to ensure that in all the efforts made to acquaint the Friends with the nature of this collective enterprise, the perspective of history is kept fully in view. The civilization of today, for all its material prowess, has been found wanting, and the verdict has been issued by the Supreme Pen. Know ye not that we have rolled up that which the people possessed and have unfolded a new order in its place? The establishment of divine civilization is, in the words of the Guardian, the primary mission of the Baha'i faith. It is to be built upon the most fundamental qualities, ones for which the world stands in great need: unity, trustworthiness, mutual support, collaboration, fellow feeling, selflessness, commitment to truth, a sense of responsibility, a thirst to learn, the love of an all-embracing heart. All of these qualities need to be at the forefront of our mind and soul as we reach outward to embrace many more of our fellow humans in this work. In its message on the 4th of January to the Bahá'ís of the world, the Universal House of Justice continued these themes. They said a confluence of circumstances in the world at large and within the faith has made this a charged moment. The global challenges now facing humanity are a severe test of its willingness to put aside short-term self-interest and come to terms with this stark spiritual and moral reality. There is but one interconnected human family, and it shares one precious homeland. At this same moment, the followers of Baha'u'llah are examining anew the possibilities before them to release the society-building powers of the faith. This plan will test their stamina, their willpower, and the strength of their love for those who dwell alongside them. They will help to nurture in every place communities of common purpose that recognize the power of unity to heal, to transcend. Within these communities, every soul may find sanctuary, and in the Friends' many endeavours for worship and praise, for education, for social transformation, for the development of communities, in all these, every soul may find room to grow and serve. We are stirred by the promise of Abdul Baha. The small shall be made great, and the powerless shall be given strength. They that are of tender age shall become the children of the kingdom, and those that have gone astray shall be guided to their heavenly home. So above all, it is love that leads us to widen the circle of participation, to seek to create an environment where everyone can grow and serve humanity. These words of the Universal House of Justice are soul-stirring, and they give us hope, but they also make a great call upon every one of us. Perhaps we stand too close to this process to even begin to truly appreciate the significance of this historical moment and the mission entrusted to us. Every day, the news confronts us with stories of human suffering, of crises affecting the planet. While deeply moved by the suffering of so many in this world, and committed to working to alleviate such suffering, Bahá'ís and other well-wishers of humanity still see cause for optimism and hope in the face of all that might otherwise drive us to despair. On the one hand, the world is suffering from an escalating process of disintegration that manifests itself in wars, terrorism, chaos, physical and psychological insecurity, and a widespread condition of material poverty. On the other hand, forces of integration are moving individuals and groups towards the adoption of new values, new forms of organization, and appropriate structures that can lay the foundation for the establishment of a new social order and unprecedented opportunities to build a better future. There is an increasingly urgent need to widen the circle of participation of those involved in the work of integration. In seeking to respond to the needs of humanity at this time, the 9-year plan explicitly evokes the heroism of the 10-year crusade. In this respect, it is significant to recall that more was accomplished in the 10 years of that crusade by ordinary men, women, and children who rose and became heroes in response to the call of the head of the faith at that time. than in all the previous years of the faith. A brief excerpt from the film, Glimpses of 100 Years of Endeavour, is a touching and inspiring reminder of that heroism.
By 1953, the capacity of the Baha'i community had so increased that Shoghi Effendi could now call for the first global collective plan. A 10-year, world-embracing spiritual enterprise, further unfolding Abdul Baha's divine plan. The Baha'is responded immediately. Young and old, rich and poor, frail and healthy, single or with families. Leaving everything behind, they traveled to places often unknown to them to share Baha'u'llah's teachings with all. No account can ever record every sacrifice, every heroic act that these souls offered. Many of those they met were longing for such teachings, and soon, together, they began to work for the betterment of the world.
It's hard not to be moved by the sight and stories of those beautiful souls. As we attempt to appreciate the importance of this current time, we can also see its significance in relation to the much longer historical context of religious revelation across many centuries. Throughout the ages, God has sent divine messengers, among them Abraham, Krishna, Zoroaster, Moses, Buddha, Jesus Christ, Muhammad, the Bab and Baha'u'llah, each of whom has exerted an incomparable influence on the evolution of all aspects of human society. Through this lens, the present state of the world and the significance of our efforts at this time can be regarded as a natural stage in an organic process which has progressively brought about unity of the family, of the tribe, the city-state and the nation, and will finally lead to the unification of the human race within a social order founded on justice and peace. From this perspective, humanity can be seen to have gone through evolutionary stages like those experienced by an individual. Having passed through infancy and childhood, humanity is now experiencing the difficult culminating moments of a turbulent adolescence. The present state of confusion, doubt, and belligerence in the world can be understood as the condition of an adolescent who strongly desires growth and maturity, but is still attached to childish attitudes and customs. This adolescent is now ready to take a final step and enter the constructive and dynamic but balanced state of maturity and adulthood. The establishment of divine civilization on earth represents this maturity. With all the current suffering in the world, each one of us needs to play our part in humanity's transition to maturity. Another perspective is the lens on Baha'i history provided for us by Shoghi Effendi, the great-grandson of Baha'u'llah and head of the Baha'i faith from 1921 to 1957. He referred to three major evolutionary stages through which the Baha'i faith must pass. the heroic age from 1844 to 1921, which is associated with the earliest stages of its history and the central figures of the Baha'i faith, the Bab, Baha'u'llah, and Abdul Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah and his designated successor. Following this is the formative age from 1921, from now and beyond, and then the future golden age, which will represent the consummation of this glorious dispensation. Each of these ages is comprised of periods, or epochs, which are inseparable parts of one integrated whole. The timing of each epoch is designated by the head of the faith, and given the organic nature of evolutionary development, the transition from one epoch to another may not be abrupt, but may well occur over a period of months or years. Looking back from now, 2022, we have completed the first century of the formative age. It has now been actually 101 years since the passing of Abdul Baha. For a century, we have been following the provisions of Abdul Baha's Will and Testament, a charter document which establishes his covenant and outlines the framework for the evolution of the Baha'i administrative order. Each of the epochs of the formative age mark progressive stages in the evolution of the Baha'i community and the widening circle of participation in its efforts. These epochs also signal the maturation of its institutions, thus enabling the Baha'i faith to operate at new levels and to initiate new functions in response to the emerging needs of society and the community's developing capacity. During this first century, we have also been learning to implement the provision of Abdul Baha's tablets of the Divine Plan. These tablets collectively constitute another charter document that provides the guidelines for the global expansion of the Baha'i community as it works to transform society and bring about the unification of humanity. Like all the plans that have preceded it, the current 9-year plan traces its origin to these tablets. The Universal House of Justice gave us further insight into the significance of this current time in the annual Rizwan message of 2021. The Rizwan message is a message sent to all the Baha'is and their friends across the world during our most holy festival. In this message, they described much of the history of this time and then continued that it was at the dawn of the second epoch that the Baha'i world was already witnessing the earliest beginnings of that entry into the faith by troops, by which they mean large numbers, that had been foreseen by the author of the Divine Plan. In the succeeding decades, generations of devoted believers within the community of the greatest name have labored in the divine vineyard to cultivate the conditions required for sustained large-scale growth. And at this glorious season of Rizwan, how abundant are the fruits of those labors. The phenomenon of sizable numbers swelling the activities of the community, catching the spark of faith, and swiftly arising to serve at the leading edge of the plan has moved from being a forecast sustained by faith to a recurring reality. What a beautiful description of widening the circle of participation. They continued, such a pronounced and demonstrable advance demands to be marked in the annals of the cause. With elated hearts, we announce that the third epoch of the Master's divine plan has begun. Stage by stage, epoch after epoch shall his plan unfold, until the light of the kingdom illumines every heart. So at some glorious stage in the future, the circle of participation will have widened to the extent of embracing every heart. In the meantime, we constantly look outward to include more and more people as protagonists, as actors in the process of transforming society, materially, and spiritually. The last series of plans, essentially the period from 1996 to 2021, received an exciting overview in the Rizwan message that I've just quoted. In this message, we saw how those years had seen a significant advance in our capacity to carry forward the work of these two essential charters of Abdu'l-Baha. During those 25 years, the Baha'i community gradually responded to three profound questions it faced in 1996, all of which were involved in effectively widening the circle of participation in the efforts to work for the betterment of the world. These questions were: how could efforts aimed at its expansion proceed hand in hand with the process of consolidation and resolve the long-standing, seemingly intractable challenge of sustaining growth? How could individuals, institutions, and communities be raised up that would be capable of translating Baha'u'llah's teachings into action? And thirdly, how could those who were attracted to the teachings become protagonists in a global spiritual enterprise? In 1996, the worldwide Baha'i community was summoned by the Universal House of Justice to take up the vast educational challenge that answering these questions entailed by establishing a network of training institutes focused on generating an increasing flow of individuals endowed with the necessary capacities to sustain the process of growth. Training institutes are essentially a system of distance education founded on the Word of God that are concerned with contributing to the advancement of civilization through the applications of Baha'u'llah's teachings. The training institutes were to prove critical to the learning and advancements that followed, and in providing a sound means on which we could continue to widen the circle of participation. As challenges were faced and as opportunities were embraced by the Baha'i community over those 25 years, new elements were added to an emerging framework for action that now underpins the efforts of increasing numbers of Baha'is and other well-wishers of humanity who work with them to transform society. Again, to quote the Universal House of Justice, as the efforts of the Friends intensified, various principles, concepts, and strategies of universal relevance to the growth process began to crystallize into a framework for action that could evolve to accommodate new elements. This framework proved fundamental to the release of tremendous vitality. It assisted the Friends to channel their energies in ways that experience has shown were conducive to the growth of healthy communities. The result was that we could more effectively widen the circle of participation. We see this in many settings in New Zealand, from intense work undertaken in neighbourhoods to the work across clusters among receptive populations, and in the efforts of Baha'is everywhere to reach out to their neighbours and friends wherever they live and work. An important development in this time that has seen a profound shift in our thinking and approach is an increasingly outward focus, consciously and constantly seeking to widen the circle of participation, described by the Universal House of Justice as follows. And significantly, Baha'i communities adopted an increasingly outward-looking orientation. Any soul responsive to the vision of the faith could become an active participant, even a promoter and facilitator of educational activities, meetings for worship and other elements of the community building work. From among such souls, many would also declare their faith in Baha'u'llah. Thus, a conception of the process of entry by troops emerged that relied less on theories and assumptions and more on actual experience, of how large numbers of people could find the faith, become familiar with it, identify with its aim, join in its activities and deliberations, and in many cases embrace it. Indeed, as the Institute process was strengthened in region after region, the number of individuals taking a share in the work of the plan, extending even to those recently acquainted with the faith, grew by leaps and bounds. But this was not being driven by a mere concern for numbers. A vision of personal and collective transformation occurring simultaneously, founded on study of the Word of God and an appreciation of each person's capacity to become a protagonist in a profound spiritual drama, had given rise to a sense of common endeavour. The worldwide series of conferences held earlier this year, including in many settings in New Zealand, showed us how confidently we can look outward and how many people around us are well-wishers of humanity, receptive to the vision of Baha'u'llah and longing to contribute to transforming society of which they are a part. When the framework for action is applied with an outward orientation, every individual can potentially become a protagonist in a highly effective collective endeavour to bring about the material and spiritual transformation of their community. And the Training Institute is at the heart of these endeavours. Of the more than 300 training institutes established across the world since 1996, 2 of them are in New Zealand, one in the North Island and the other in South Island. These institutes endow Aotearoa with capacity to make a substantial contribution to engaging ever larger numbers of people in the work of developing spiritually vibrant communities and releasing society-building power. When the concept of the Training Institute was first introduced, it was in the context of the need to raise up human resources to take on the tasks of expansion and consolidation. However, at the end of 2021, the Universal House of Justice said, at this juncture, when a new series of plans has just begun, we invite you to take a more expansive view. Increasingly, participation in Institute courses is preparing the Friends of God for an ever deeper engagement in the life of the wider community. It is endowing them with knowledge, insights, and skills that enable them to contribute not only to the process of developing their own community, but to the progress of society. In short, the Institute is a potent means for the society-building power of the faith to find release. So what will it mean to take a more expansive view? In my understanding, society building is not something that is now added on after the community building process in a given setting, underpinned by the Institute, reaches a particular stage of development. Rather, we can now see that from the earliest stages of the growth process, the seeds of society building are already there. If you like, the DNA of society building is inherent in the entire Institute from the very first course offered by the Training Institute, Reflections on the Life of the Spirit. It's important to note that the Institute's main sequence of courses is not arranged according to a series of subject matters with the specific aim of increasing individuals' knowledge. The content and order are based rather on a series of acts of service, the practice of which creates capacity in the individual to meet the exigencies of dynamic, developing communities. The enhancement of such capacity is viewed in terms of walking a path of service. On this path, individuals are assisted first in accomplishing relatively simple tasks, and then in performing more complex and demanding acts of service. This is the nature of capacity building. Someone accompanies you as you learn to walk the path by yourself. If you fall, there is someone close by to give you a hand. Mistakes are accepted, confidence is gradually built. setting grandiose goals and whipping up enthusiasm through constant emotional appeals are avoided. And who are these participants? Well, in the Few Thoughts for the Tutor from Book 1, we read the following. Participants worldwide come to this first Institute course from diverse backgrounds. Some are already members of the Baha'i community who hope to enhance their capacity to serve the cause they have embraced. Others see the course as the beginning of their investigation of the Baha'i faith as a religion. Still others are attracted to Baha'i ideals and wish to acquaint themselves with the community's aims and endeavours. And there are an increasing number of young people in particular who, wanting to develop their capacity to serve society, often through one or another program promoted by the Baha'i community, take the course as an initial step. My dear colleague, Auxiliary Board Member Jeffrey Sabor, will be giving a presentation on the Training Institute, so I leave it with him to say a lot more. Suffice it to say, for our purpose today, we are beginning to gain a much greater appreciation of the Training Institute as an instrument of limitless potentiality. It is the Training Institute that makes it possible, under a wide diversity of conditions, in virtually any cluster, for an expanding nucleus of individuals to generate a movement towards the goal of a new world order. So who are, or what is this expanding nucleus? In biology, the nucleus is a specialized structure occurring in most cells that controls and regulates the activity of the cell, such as, rather tellingly, growth, and it carries the genes. The nucleus has been described as the information processing and administrative center of the cell. We can also think of a nucleus in the context of atoms. In the core of every atom is a nucleus consisting of electrically positive protons and neutrons, held together by the strongest known fundamental force, which is called the strong force. I like to think of that as a little bit like the forces of divine assistance or the spiritual forces released through our service. Perhaps we can see the qualities of both types of nuclei when we explore what the expanding nucleus is in the context of community building and the release of society building powers. So let us once again consider some of what the Universal House of Justice has said about the expanding nucleus. Back in 2015, the House of Justice said, before long, there forms a nucleus of friends in a cluster who are working and consulting together and arranging activities. For the process of growth to advance further, the number of people sharing this commitment must rise, hence expanding, and their capacity for undertaking systematic action within the framework of the plan must correspondingly increase. So not only are they expanding in number, they're expanding in capacity. And similarly to the development of a living organism, growth can occur quickly when the right conditions are in place. In 2018, the House of Justice said, fundamentally, as we have previously indicated, there must emerge in many hundreds of clusters a growing band of believers who can maintain with those around them a sustained focus on nurturing growth and building capacity, and who are distinguished by their ability and their discipline to reflect on action and learn from experience. Raising up and accompanying an expanding nucleus of individuals in each place, not just at the level of the cluster, but within neighbourhoods and villages, is at once a formidable challenge and a critical need. But where this is occurring, the results speak for themselves. And then in 2019, in case we weren't hearing what was being said, the House of Justice said, we rejoice to see that in a growing number of clusters and in neighbourhoods and villages within them, a nucleus of friends has emerged who, through action and reflection, are discovering what is required at a particular point for the process of growth to advance in their surroundings. And then in December 2021, they've said that 6 years ago, we described for you the characteristics of a cluster where the friends have passed the third milestone along the continuum of growth. And this is just a stage in the development of the process of the Baha'i community's efforts. To have come this far implies intense activity occurring in specific neighbourhoods or villages, but also concerted effort being made by the generality of the believers living across the cluster, the people living anywhere. They continued, it entails families and individual believers working together and making a conscious decision to see themselves as belonging to an expanding nucleus. What do? Such groups of friends set about widening the circle of participation in their activities by engaging with the networks to which they belong. Networks created through a place of work or study, a local school, or a community hub of another kind, and by accompanying others who arise to serve alongside them. So, simply, an expanding nucleus can form in any setting among any group of people, and it has a crucial role to play in widening the circle of participation. This is the work before us now. It is the means we sustain widening participation and is an expression of such participation. Experience across the world is showing us that one of the most natural forms that an expanding nucleus can take is a group of families. Whether that group is in a small setting where there is a receptive population and intense activity, or among a specific population that has shown receptivity to the faith but is dispersed throughout a cluster, or in any of the many other settings where people live and come together. We know the family is itself a nucleus of human society, and the habits and patterns of conduct nurtured within the family are carried into the workplace, into the local community, into the social and political life of a country, and even into the arena of international relations. The harmonious functioning and the development and maintenance of the bonds of love that connect the members of a family give expression to the truth that the well-being of the individual is inextricably bound to the progress and well-being of others. A group of families is essentially any number of families that have a natural link between them. Perhaps they all live next door to each other, or at least near each other. Perhaps they are all part of an extended family that has strong bonds of kinship but can include others. Perhaps they are families or households who are part of a network formed through a workplace or the school their children attend. A group of families begins to come together on a regular basis, often starting out by coming together for prayers and then incorporating study, consultation, and spiritual education classes for children and junior youth. In this way, not only is the devotional character of their community strengthened, but the circle of participation widens and growth takes place. Not surprisingly, experience has shown that the major catalyst for families working together tends to be a common interest. For example, the spiritual education of their children, resulting in families initiating children's classes for the children in their families and later transitioning to the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program as children become older. The focus of this activity is often based on the needs of the families, and in many cases, mothers are the instigators. Other catalysts for bringing a group of families together are natural friendships, again among parents, geographic proximity, social action, being part of a receptive population, for example, newly arrived migrant populations, or even being members of the Baha'i community. In whatever way a group of families forms, it reaches a point sooner or later when it has to shift its focus from the needs of the families or the households who are already part of the group to the wider community around it, and along with this, to build capacity for more service. We've learned that imparting a vision of transformation at the outset is pivotal to creating a sense of mission in a group of families and sustaining the group. In this context, the revised Rui Books 1 and 2 can be great resources in helping families develop the capacity to reach out to those around them and have meaningful conversations that allow those around them to become protagonists fairly quickly. Experience is also showing the value of reciprocity in a group of families or households, expressed most often when people are comfortable visiting each other in their homes. Home visits provide an important opportunity to listen and observe, to better understand each family's interests and aspirations, and to build bonds of genuine friendship and love. This assists in discussing concepts that are of immediate interest and relevance to the family's circumstances. We have seen that individuals and families from different cultures may need to be approached differently, and we need to learn how to visit them in a way that is mindful of their background. To this end, though, it is important not to make assumptions about the family's aspirations and interests because of their cultural background. Such assumptions impact our ability to truly listen and understand. So how do we move from sharing prayers to something more? How is this done? We are learning that when devotions are thoughtfully organised and spiritually charged, the gathering tends to provide an environment in which participants feel empowered and engage in deeper conversation. There is thoughtful and conscious effort required, though, to avoid slipping into conversations on more trivial topics, which are so often a feature of our present society. To this end, some groups of families select themes for each devotional gathering in order to engage everyone in a purposeful conversation. Themes such as family life, consultation, and the family being a nation in miniature. This seems to help the flow of conversation to be more natural. In some settings, using the theme service to humanity as the first topic shared has had a strong impact. This conversation awakens the desire for service, which is latent in nearly every heart. The theme of service to humanity has made conversation about study circles, children's classes, junior youth groups, and holding of more devotional meetings much easier and more natural. In some instances, it's been found that this theme has also provided a natural opportunity to watch the video Global Vision, Local Action. For those of you who are not familiar with this video, let's take an excerpt. Look at an excerpt from that short video now.
So if we want to think about an irrepressible movement, I guess an example is how the human body grows. How that growth takes place, how different cells in the body learns its own responsibility and then applies it for the continued health of the body. The same way, in the community, every individual, every member of the community, every institution has to learn what are those responsibilities and role each one has to play, and contributing to that vision for a healthy body, a healthy community, and advancing civilization. And where we see this happening, there is complete joy in the community. There is complete joy of the people as well.
وحدة الجنس البشري مع اختلاف ثقافاتهم، مع اختلاف خلفياتهم وقبائلهم وأعراقهم وثقافاتهم، فتحتاج إلى مبادئ تجمع الكل.
We still have racism around, black against whites, but even different nationalities. But then, we all come together and we have this bond, and that is like to bring unity into this community and to the world.
So we understand that we are one. And as we understand that we are one, then we have to work for that oneness. So in the process of working for that oneness, we serve others, we help others.
The community is always concerned about the development of spiritual and material aspects. If anyone's willing to start any project, we have to, discuss together what are the benefits of such projects in both aspects, both spiritual and material. least we apply whatever we learned and help our community to, progress.
Cuando un grupo se levanta y empieza a proyectar ciertos cambios, ¿sí?, en su comportamiento, en la manera de relacionarse, en cómo conversan, en cómo sirven a los demás, en cuáles son las aspiraciones y propósitos en su vida, de repente la cultura de ese lugar empieza a transformarse.
Quand la population commence à voir comment elle-même peut se prendre en charge du point de vue, se développer du point de vue spirituel, du point de vue social, du point de vue intellectuel, nous allons amener la véritable, ou bien une véritable compréhension sur le développement communautaire.
Around the world, Baha'is are learning about translating principles they believe in, such as the oneness of humankind or the centrality of selfless service to others, into action at the local level. These efforts, like those of the United Nations, are most effective when local communities are embraced, not simply as executors of plans, but as capable partners in a shared process of learning and exploration.
Imagine the conversations this video could spark in your home. As we just saw, an element of the video and of the framework for action for community building that helps the groups of families or any other nucleus to grow is that of learning in action at the grassroots. I referred earlier to the importance of the framework for action, but as the Universal House of Justice has noted, a framework is not a formula. By taking into account the various elements of the framework when assessing the reality of a cluster, a locality, or simply a neighbourhood, a pattern of activity could be developed that draws on what the rest of the Baha'i world was learning while still being a response to the particulars of that place. Very importantly, a dichotomy between rigid requirements on the one hand and limitless personal preferences on the other gave way to a more nuanced understanding of the variety of means by which individuals could support a process that at its heart was coherent and continually being refined as experience accumulated. We see this in the video and the many other films that are now available to us, illustrating some of the international experience of the efforts of the Baha'i community to widen the circle of participation in settings across the world. Our vision is always global, but action and learning needs to take place at the grassroots and will only ever be effective in widening the circle of participation if we are learning to read our reality and apply the global vision and approach to the conditions at the grassroots where we are. To quote the House of Justice one more time, regardless of a community starting point, it has advanced the process of growth when it has combined qualities of faith, perseverance, and commitment with a readiness to learn. In fact, a cherished legacy of this series of plans is the widespread recognition that any effort to advance begins with an orientation towards learning. They continued, a commitment to learning also meant being prepared to make mistakes. And sometimes, of course, mistakes brought discomfort. Unsurprisingly, new methods and approaches were handled inexpertly at first because of a lack of experience. On occasion, a newly acquired capacity of one kind was lost as a community became absorbed in developing another. Having the best of intentions is no guarantee against making missteps, and moving past them requires both humility and detachment. When a community has remained determined to show forbearance and learn from mistakes that naturally occur, progress has never been out of reach. So take heart. We all have to start somewhere, and we shouldn't be afraid to learn. The House of Justice has described a process that is both simple and complex when it said, again in December 2021, the challenge facing the Friends serving at the grassroots is essentially the same in every place. They must be able to read their own reality and ask what, in light of the possibilities and requirements at hand, would be fitting objectives to pursue in the coming cycle or series of cycles, a cycle being a period of 3 months. So is this not something that every single one of us can do, along with those around us, whether they're part of a family or not? This guidance applies in every reality, every setting, not just a centre of intense activity or across a whole cluster. What might it mean to you and your family or household, and the families and households to which you are connected? Once there are 2 or 3 groups of families, they can also be supported by Bahá'í institutions and agencies to learn collectively. When one or more members of a group of families is able to join with the members of another group of families to study guidance, reflect on experience, and share learning, perhaps at gatherings convened by their local assembly or an area teaching committee, all the groups involved can advance more quickly in an environment of mutual support and encouragement of collective learning. A final consideration is that offered by the House of Justice in the following description. As the inhabitants of such locations begin to participate in Bahá'í activities in large numbers, more consideration needs to be given to coordination in order to cope with the inherent complexity involved. Within each centre of intense activity, collaborative arrangements emerge among groups of families who organise community building activities among themselves with a view to widening the embrace of such activities to many nearby households. An informal network of friends provides encouragement and support to the endeavours underway, and naturally there remains a strong focus on being outward looking. So while this guidance speaks specifically to the friends and groups of families in a centre of intense activity, which by their nature reach higher degrees of activity in a shorter period, the need for encouragement and support and the value of a network among the groups of families is evident in any setting. Questions are likely to arise for groups of families in any setting, and learning alongside other groups of families can be a great assistance and support. We started by recalling the vision of Baha'u'llah for continually widening circles of participation in the work of society building. We recalled the historic mission of this time, the significance of this moment in history, noting how the heroism it calls for and the demands it will make upon us are reminiscent of the 10-year crusade. We also saw how significant was the learning of the period 1996 to 2021, and how this has endowed the Baha'i community with the capacity to widen the circle of participation in the work of building a materially and spiritually advancing civilization that gives full expression to the oneness of humanity. While the magnitude of the shift that was underway was not evident to many back in 1996, and perhaps only dimly emerging during that 25-year period, it is now clear that the Baha'i community underwent a change that, in the words of the Universal House of Justice, endowed it with an undreamed capacity to learn, to grow, and to serve humanity. One element of this capacity is our capacity to function at the level of the family or household with other families and households around us and continually learn and expand. Now, an even more significant shift has begun, and however bright were the achievements of the past, they must be eclipsed by what is to come. The House of Justice has said that by the conclusion of the new series of plans in 2046, the Baha'i community will need to have acquired capacities that can scarcely be glimpsed at present. It is up to every single one of us to exert ourselves in order to see progress in the course of this 9 years that draws on all that we have learnt and eclipses all that we have done till now. As described by the Universal House of Justice, during this period, the Baha'i world will be focused on a single aim, the release of the society-building power of the faith in ever greater measures. The pursuit of this overall aim will require a further rise in the capacity of the individual believer, the local community, and the institutions of the faith. These three constant protagonists of the plan each have a part to play, and each one has capacities and qualities that must be developed. However, each is incapable of manifesting its full potential on its own. It is by strengthening their dynamic relationships with one another that their powers are combined and multiplied. Abdu'l-Baha explains that the more the qualities of cooperation and mutual assistance are manifested by a people, the more will human society advance in progress and prosperity. In the faith, this principle distinguishes and shapes the interactions of the individual, institutions, and communities, and it endows the body of the cause with moral vigor and spiritual health. This plan will build on all that we have learned, but it will require greatly expanded vision and action. It is not incremental change that is needed. It is not doing a bit more of what we've been doing. We need to see what we are doing with a whole new light. A huge change is underway that we may not yet appreciate, and perhaps we won't appreciate till we look back in the future. This plan will be generational in scope. Imagine where the children, the junior youth, and the youth of today will be in 25 years, let alone those of us who are a bit older. Widening the circle of participation must embrace these children and junior youth and all those around them in order to equip them to carry forward the betterment of the world. And our efforts, particularly in groups of families, to provide for them moral and material education are highly significant in equipping them for the responsibilities they will undertake now and into the future. Above all, this new series of plans calls for courage and an increasingly outward focus, removing any last vestiges in our thoughts and actions of us and them, of Bahá'ís and others, as we reach out to create ever-widening circles of participation in the work of building a new world. For those who have not yet embarked on this journey, doing so as part of a group of families or households can provide a highly effective and supportive way to do so. I've quoted the Universal House of Justice a lot during this talk, deliberately so because I think we're still coming to terms with the guidance they've provided for the future. And I will end with these inspiring words. The inherent power possessed by the cause of Baha'u'llah is visible even in the fledgling efforts of a Baha'i community learning to serve humanity and promote the word of God. And though the world society foreshadowed in his revelation is of course far distant, communities that are earnestly learning to apply his teachings to their social reality abound. How immensely blessed are those souls who, alive to the greatness of this day and the significance of their actions, strive for the emergence of a society shaped by the divine teachings. Where growing numbers are helping to build communities of this character, the power of the cause to transform people's social existence, as well as their inner lives, becomes increasingly visible. Thank you.